Okay, well, I guess we're going to go ahead. Hi, Greta. Thanks for logging on. I guess if anybody else decides to join us or log in, then that's fine. Basically today, as it shows on the beginning slide, just going to talk about the fundamentals of effective projects. I know that, a lot of our communities, in particular on reserve, of course, a lot of projects are taken on by people in the band offices. So what we're going to do is just go over a process for project management. So this slide here, understanding community needs and gaps. Now, what I took a look at was the grassroots resources. What do we have in our communities that we can use currently and be able to address the needs and the gaps in the community with those grassroots resources? So, in our communities as members, and specifically on reserve members, we ourselves have an understanding and are faced with the day-to-day realities of what our communities are really strong and keen in and what our communities are lacking. And what we need to start doing is building projects within our communities on those aspects in order to have meaningful projects and to address these pieces to make our communities stronger, to build them stronger. So I think, if there's challenges in our communities, the best ones to cater and address those challenges are our communities and our people within it. So hopefully this is going to help you take a look at those gaps, those needs, and we're going to go through this process that's going to help move forward. Okay, so I'm going to start over again. Okay?
I'm sorry we have to start over again.
It's okay, lessons learned. We were learning with how to roll with the punches. It's good. So I'll start over. Okay, so
all right.
What I was saying was that this webinar is basically going to take a look and go through the process of project coordination or project management. A majority of our projects, are funded through governments or ministries, but there's always some legwork that has to be put into place before it gets to that phase or before it gets to that steps of funding. So, what I was saying was that the majority of our communities, these projects are kicked off by certain organizations in the First Nation or certain departments at the band office level for our community members, right? So, okay, so moving forward, what I took a look here is that, a lot of our communities, we need to start taking a look at our grassroots resources, what we have in the community that we can use now to help fill those needs and gaps, and developing a project or, developing plans to address those needs and gaps with the input of our grassroots resources. So in our communities, as members and specifically on reserve members, we have an understanding and are faced with the day-to-day realities of what our communities are strong in, right? And what our communities are lacking. So, who best to put together, projects but our own people? So building projects within our communities, have to be meaningful and address pieces to build our community stronger. And of course, who better to do that but our own people? So moving forward, taking a look, addressing the needs and gaps and how we're going to get there. So in this diagram basically just sets out the 4 pieces to the project, to the big project. And we're going to go through these pieces. Now, the nice thing about this is that with the setup, the planning, the delivery, and the close of the projects, this is where, we as First Nations people and our groupings, our groups, our organizations, our departments, our communities, we can have input into these 4 pieces to create this project that's going to reflect and facilitate addressing those needs and gaps in our communities.
Right.
Okay, still, okay. And this is good because I can hear you, so that's great. So when we take a look, we're going to take a look at the setup component piece, the first piece. So once the idea for a project has been approved by the band manager or your chief and council, maybe it's a specific board, it could be an education board, the first step is to establish the bare bones. So this block diagram is the setup. It supports the setup. This is the bare bones of everything. And we're going to go through this step by step. Okay? So get comfortable, make sure you have your notepad out and you can jot down points as we go along. And maybe, as we go along, if you have any questions, just maybe, put them on the side. So for setup, if you have any questions regarding setup, maybe just put a bullet question that we can address at the end of the webinar. Okay?
Okay.
At the end of the presentation, yeah. We'll stay online, but we'll discuss it. So,
okay.
Pardon me. The bare bones. So the first part of the setup is to appoint. So you're going to want to appoint a project manager or someone who will take responsibility of the project. So this would be your project manager or your coordinator. And this usually happens within your band offices, our band offices, in those specific departments. So if it's, say, health and social, that would be something you would bring up to your counselor who is, got that specific portfolio. But again, this would be done by the person in that department or in that organization within your band. The next is your project control. So you need to agree on the project controls. You're going to identify, the reporting requirements and agreeing on a member of that relevant board to have an oversight. So taking a look at having somebody who can contribute and assist in identifying reporting requirements. So basically, it's also taking a look at, in that development of the proposal, who are you going to be preparing it for? Who's going to be funding it? And basically you've got to make sure that your setup is going to meet their demands, what they're going to want to see in order to get funding in the long term of things. So prepare, when we take a look at preparing a project brief. So basically an overview, a very in-depth summary of what it is you want to do, what it is this project is going to address, your reasons for the project, okay? And the time frame of the project, and of course, eventually your costs of the project. And then of course, review is basically self-explanatory. You just want to continue to review until your entire proposal, basically this is your proposal piece, okay? The setup, the objectives of your proposal. Okay? Okay, next, moving on. Oh, I almost hit the wrong button. Okay.
So I got a question on the review.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'll ask you after.
Okay. So the planning stage. Okay, so this planning stage, it starts once the project funder has indicated that the setup stage, like the stage prior, the setup stage is satisfactory. So it meets all of their requirements, what they want to see. Okay, you're meeting all of their demands of your funding. Okay, so this one has 6 pieces to it. Okay, now the planning stage involves doing detailed planning for each component identified in the project brief. So basically, in your project brief, in your setup piece, right, your setup stage, how are you going to meet them? How are you going to meet those components, okay, in your project brief? Your outcomes, how are we going to get to those outcomes? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to appoint a project team. So usually within your department staff, if you have, if you've got a department staff already in place, the majority of your project team would incorporate those staff members. But it would also, and it could also incorporate, like social and health, that's so broad. There's so many things that you can incorporate into that. You can incorporate elders. You can incorporate youth, which could also incorporate, education planning, education pieces or education people or staff, so it could be really broad, depending on, what your project is, okay?
Okay.
The other part is the project plan. The details of the objectives, what your goal, basically what your goals are, your outputs, and agreeing on an action plan and timeline. What needs to be done by whom and by when. That's the next step. So basically your project plan is done by you and your entire team. Okay, and you basically break it down. Details of the objectives, your outputs, and scope of the project, who you're going to be reaching. Then and then the next one is the action plan. Agreeing on action plan and timelines. What are the timelines and what needs to be done by whom and by when? So basically your project team, each person is going to have roles and responsibilities. What are they? Okay, and your timelines. How are we all going to work together to meet these timelines that are set for us to carry out the project?
How do you determine these timelines, though?
Well, it's all.
Do you do you have a set time, already if you're applying for funding and you have 2 years to complete it, or
that would be your 2 years.
Put that in as part of your.
That is your. Yep. That's in your setup stage.
Okay. That's in your setup. Okay. Good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the next one that we're talking about is the budget. So putting together a detailed budget. Now, in this case, it could go from anywhere from, the budget. How much is your project going to cost? Is it going to involve salaries? So if it's going to involve salaries, you've got your wages and your mercs that have to be, compensated for. If there is any salaries, some projects don't have salaries. Some projects will just, depending on the amount of money you have, it might just cover the actions. So say they were volunteers. It might just cover the supplies. It might cover, all of these things have to be recorded in your budget. Are you going to need supplies? Are you going to need rentals? Are you going to need, equipment? Are you going, an equipment that's, your phone or your,